and gentlemen, I want to revisit the Willie Lynch letter because, when you read through the Willie Lynch letter, even though, some people have said, oh, that is not a real letter. Well, why isn't it so accurate to how black people have been divided here in America and also throughout the world? Why is so accurate? Very, very accurate. Well, I want to read through this just a little bit and just point out the power of division and how we as black people, even globally, participate in this particular division. And if you want to strip away the ability of racism, white supremacy to keep controlling black folk, the key is to get rid of the division and how division is used. So in the letter, as we looking at here, he said, in my bag here, I have a foolproof method, it said, for controlling the black slaves. He said, I guarantee every one of you that if it's installed correctly, in which it has, he said, it will control the slaves for at least 300 years. He said, my method is simple. Any member of your family or your overseer can use it. He said, I've outlined a number of differences among the slaves. He said, and I take these differences and make them bigger. Use fear, distrust, and envy for control purposes. Now listen to that. Fear, distrust, and envy. What do they do with the police? Why do they use the propaganda with police, right? They show a police officer gunning down a black person and running on a loop every day in the media. Now the police, actually, if you do the research, they shoot more white people than even black people. But based on the media propaganda, is why I say it's propaganda, it will make you think that they're only doing it to black people. So they show this in a loop, and what is the loop supposed to do? Make you fear. You understand? That's part of the tactics of Willie Lynch. It's to get you to fear. Same thing during slavery. They would take a slave out, beat the slave, do all kind of horrible and gross things to the slave, even bug break slaves in front of everybody. All the slaves on the plantation. Why? For fear. He continued to say that he also used distrust. Why distrust? Because when a person distrusts you, a lot of times you're trying to gain that trust of that person. So if you're constantly trying to gain the trust and you'll never get it because that's a tactic that's being used, that's control. He say, and envy for the control purposes, jealousy, right? Validation is part of it. Oh, why this person get to be in the good graces of massa and I can't? So you not like another black person because they're in the good graces of massa, right? It's all about control. Now he continues to say these methods have worked on my modest plantation in the West Indies or the Caribbean. He said, and will work throughout the South. He said, take this simple little list of differences and think about them. He said, on top of my list is age, but it is there because it starts with the letter A. The second is color or shade. There's intelligence, sex size of plantations, status on plantation, attitude of owners, whether the slaves live in the valley, on the hill, east, west, north, south, have fine hair, coarse hair, or is tall or short. Now, listen to that list. If you look in the black community today, he mentioned age. The younger people don't like the older people, and the older people don't like the younger people. He talks about color and shade, colorism. Not only do we have colorism in this society in America, but we actually practice colorism within our own community, and you know this. Intelligence, AKA boule. Oh, well, I'm smarter than the average black person. I'm part of this group called a boule. The rest of them are underneath me. I'm next to massa. Of course, you're talking about size, say sex, size, plantation. Now, you can go on and so forth, right? Attitude of the owners, status of the plantation is what I'm talking about. Oh, well, I'm close to the massa. I'm getting crumbs from the table. That's a division. Understand what I'm saying? And what I'm liking the boule because they all kind of fit into the status of the plantation. They fit on intelligence, things like that.
Experience. Why am I playing something like Willie Lynch syndrome from 1712? Now you see an updated version of this young man here, And we're seeing how this has been perfected. This is what the white supremacists of 1712, was the name actually Willie Lynch?
It was William Lynch.
William Lynch. That was his actual name. All right, tell us what you've observed about this creation.
Well, it's quite evident that over the years that they have perfected and have mastered the division between people of color, not only here in the United States, but all across the globe.
Yeah.
Many of us feel that this letter that was presented by Willie Lynch was only presented to us here in America, but this systematic division has been placed upon people all across the globe and has been used all across the globe. And so we don't wrestle just with African Americans when it comes into regards to light skin and dark skin, the older generation versus the younger generation, but we deal with that all across the globe.
One of the things that I see consistent happening in our community is the people who spout negative crap often get a chance at the microphone, whereas those who are imbued and teaching things of wisdom are often muted and pushed aside. A whole lot of people in the United States don't know who Dr. Yosef Ben Yaakov was, and some of the stuff that he did, how that advanced our community. People who don't know who John Henry Clark was. That's the kind of teacher that I think we should publicize and emulate. Yeah, there's a lot of idiots out there spouting stuff, and I don't know that it helps us to propagate or to repeat or publicize some of their negative stuff that they have. And that's part of what I think is critical, because other people who are not interested in our welfare will gladly make headlines of that. We ought to be making headlines of those people who lead, those people who teach, those people who are examples, because that's what our children miss out on, and that's part of what is a critical part of their development, that they should see both sides.
Well, what we're doing here is trying to do exactly that. That's why I presented an old story of how we've been brainwashed and bamboozled, thinking that we were nothing, and always when we were kings and queens. We're the original people. Well, how many people out there really know that?
A lot of our children don't know that. The historic African presence in terms of the regal and the dynamic and the educational accomplishments that they made, a lot of our young people have never heard of those things. Our charge is to at least pass some of that.
They've got a difficult time today understanding who Martin Luther King was.
Yes, yes.
I mean, what about you, Graham? What do you think of this Willie Lynch syndrome, we call it? You there, Graham? Can you hear?
Hello?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Speak up.
Oh, we're talking about Willie Lynch. Did you see the video?
Yes, Willie Lynch, 1712.
Right.
A plantation owner from Barbados who came here to teach the slave owners how to perpetuate control over the slaves.
We were talking about how it applies to today's problem of separation. All right, let me do this. I'm going to play another video. Play item 2. And we'll get right back to you, Graham, see if we get your audio correct.
All right.
All right? Run item 2.
The term Moor started to become interchangeable with the term black, because it was basically the same thing. But when the slave trade started, they tried to objectify black people, Moorish people. So they would use the term interchangeably, and they would just switch on to calling people black. But if you look at a lot of old documents, there's even slave ships called Blackamoor. If you look at slave records, there was even a boxer out of Virginia who was very popular in the early 1800s named Tom Molyneux, and his nickname was the Moor. So that name was definitely used interchangeably with black or Negro at that time.
Moor means black, like Negro, Ethiopian. Moor means black. Moor is not a people. Moor is a color. That they have taken this word Moor and they have associated Moor with Muslim. There were Moors that weren't Muslim. Moor means black. There were Christian Moors. There were Moors that practiced a traditional African faith system. So that Moor means black, simple.
When the Moors went into Europe, they changed the appearance of the population. Do you see? So you have Italians, Spaniards being darker than the Scandinavians. A Scandinavian person told me that they never considered the Italians or Jewish people to be white. Do you see? Because the lighter people are further north.
When I went to Europe, I would always look at pictures and I would always see a Moor, and sometimes I would see like a skull and bones. And many of the Moors would have a skull and bones flag. That's what pirates are known for. There were many Moorish pirates. There was even a Barbary War where the U.S. was fighting Moorish pirates up in North Africa and the Barbary Coast. And there's even a secret organization called the Skull and Bones. And we know that Masonry comes from Moorish science. So there's always a connection there with the Moors.
And it's important that as we begin to develop an understanding of this society, that it's not Freemason as we know it, and that the Moors brought in this knowledge into Europe. Africans brought this knowledge into Europe. And in bringing this knowledge into Europe, the Knights Templars and other organizations were born out of this. And peoples of European descent were exposed to alchemy, okay? The periodic table of elements, the laboratory, how to take information, how to take elements and atoms, and to begin to manipulate them to make them into different types of molecules. The basic one is hydrogen, 2 hydrogen is helium, 3 hydrogen is lithium, 6 is carbon, 8 is oxygen. So you have this alchemy that's going to come, and they're going to begin to study, they're going to begin to learn, they're going to create societies that's going to develop an understanding. This is going to be what eventually is going to become Freemasonry, because only a select group of people in Europe is going to be exposed to this information.
But the secret of Masonry, of who we really are, the Moors, is being here on this land, this particular land. Because it was called, in many names, you had Turtle Island, that we called it, or Tula, or El Morocco, the different terms that we had. And the original map of America was written by a guy named Idrisi. The original map was written in Sanskrit.
Antarctica was actually mapped by a Moor. And most people don't know it was mapped by a Moor. And they have old topographical evidence of old maps of Antarctica. That's why the Nazis fled there, because they knew that there were places there under the ice that they could actually inhabit and hide.
I love showing these items, and you can see all this on Hidden Colors. That's some information for you. Most of this stuff comes from the Hidden Colors 4.
That's a
the
book or
religion
website?
of white supremacy. The religion of white supremacy. Now, the reason why we talk about white supremacy is that it rules the planet. It's what's yours is mine, what mine is mine until you take it away. That's not a quote. But the idea, well, tell us something about the Moors, how they entered Europe in 700 AD and civilized Europe. Many people don't know that. Graham, are you hearing any of this?
It's still choppy.
Okay, so talk about the Moors.
Well, we know that the Moors were well known throughout Europe during the 13th, 14th, 15th centuries.
Mm-hmm.
The Habsburgs, which ruled Central Europe. There were Moorish kings in Denmark. Spain, the stewards were the Moors who ran the British Isles. King James, well known for his translation of the Bible, was also of Moorish background.
Huh. King
So,
James.
after the 1500s, they started to whiten up their record keeping and shipping the Moors out of the British Isles and Spain and France into Barbados and the West Indies, which accounts for the high rate of literacy on the island of Barbados because the blacks that they exported were not slaves. They were highly educated people.
There was a time not long ago when Barbados had the highest literacy rate in the world. Barbados was teaching its children to read and write and doing a better job than any other place in America, than any place in Europe. And this is something that we have to understand, that citing that can allow our children to deal with the fact that some teacher says, well, you're a little bit slow, you should be in special ed. Wait a minute, we are not slow. We are a people who have taught, and we are a people who have learned in ways that cannot be duplicated. Here we are in 2024.
Well, we can give thanks to the Queen of England.
Well,
because the English felt that it was important to educate people because it was easier and more beneficial for their union to educate people so that they could be self-sufficient rather than for them to be illiterate, not be able to work or function in a civilized society. And so therefore, the kingdom would have to be responsible for providing each and every one of their needs. And so therefore, to alleviate the stress and the burden of the European government to have to tend to the needs of the people, they found it more beneficial to educate them so that they can lead a life of their own.
Learning the King's English was part of the subjugation. It may have helped some people who were in bondage, but ultimately it was purposed to help the British Treasury.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a time
Excuse
when
me, I said queen, but before there was a queen, there was a king.
Several.
there was a time when the sun never set on the British Empire.
That's part of what they bragged about. Their flag was flowing all over Africa, all over South America.
The entire planet.
That was something that, and sad to say, in this day and age, we still have some people in the Caribbean and elsewhere who owe and give their fealty to the King of England because they see this as a noble lineage of the African people who were enslaved. Admiring our slave owners is not something that is necessarily going to take us forward. Copying traits that are beneficial to us, that's something that is a lot more strategic, and that's part of what we have had to deal with, particularly when we have people who were achieving degrees of scholarship beyond college, some of whom were enslaved. And they still able to learn and to teach. That's part of what our children need to know about, because this is not often discussed in the classrooms here in the United States. And I am pained to say that because I understand how our children need to know the knowledge of some of the greatest of their ancestors and how they're being denied that by people who act in ignorance.
Well, we can see the changes that happened during my lifetime. I'm 83, and I can go back to the 40s and 50s when we were segregated, and everything that any black person did reflected on all of us. And we took pride in what we did and said to be acceptable in the white supremacist world. And we were colorized, the light against the dark, the dark against the light, and
some of our children don't know this.
The paper bag syndrome.
Oh yes, the brown paper bag.
But what is so unfortunate and what keeps
That's
us
still going
divided
on now.
amongst all different nationalities is that the American black, many whom don't understand and don't realize and don't know that this is something that happened all across the world. In Hispanic-speaking countries, in French-speaking countries, it was the light skin versus the dark skin. And again, that's happened, and it's going on throughout all nationalities, just not the African American community. And if we all can realize that we all have a similar struggle when it comes to our complexion, we've got more in common than we have not in common.
Yeah, well, that's difficult to do today in the 21st century. That's why I brought the subject up.
Well, that's why it's so important that people like yourself have these type of shows and have these type of platforms to get the information out to people, especially now that we have the great new migration. It's very important that people who are naturalized citizens of this country, as well as those who are coming to this country, really know the history of this country so that they can thrive in this country. What people don't realize is that, unfortunately, America is set up in a way where they pin people against each other.
Yeah.
They pin the American citizens against those who are coming to America, seeking the American dream, wanting the same life that many of us are still fighting for ourselves. And so until we deal with policy and the way America treats those who are naturalized citizens and those who are coming seeking refuge to build a life for themselves, we're going to continue to have this divisiveness amongst our people.
The problem with integration is most immigrants that come here look at us that have been here 400 years and see our situation and think there's something wrong with us, and not the white supremacy that has brainwashed us to believing that we're the N-word. I mean, how is it today? I mean, back in my day, you couldn't call another black person the N-word. I mean, you were ready for a fight when you did that.
Right.
You better be ready for. And I passed by a bunch of Spanish kids. Said, "My nigga," and I said, you know, it's a different meaning today.
Right.
And it's sad when you think about it, but they don't know any different.
But even to accept the new term, even if you're using it in a fashionable way or a friendly way, it's important that those individuals understand the context in which it originated.
But they don't.
So that they can have an appreciation for where they are in this society. You know, because you go to some of these stores or temple stores and you have, you know, people of the Muslim race or Pakistani race, and it's like you say, hey, my nigga, my this, my that. And although they saying these things to show a commonality amongst us, they don't have a full appreciation on the hurt and the divisiveness and just the background behind it. And so again, it's important that we continue to have these platforms. It's important that we educate the parents of this new generation, because it's not like when I was growing up, my grandparents were in their 50s, 60s, and 70s. You got grandparents now that are in their 30s and their 40s who didn't have the grandparents and great-grandparents. You know, I was fortunate enough to say that I was also raised by my great-great-grandparents, who, if they were still alive today, would be about 101, 102 years old. So therefore, I was able to...
You were blessed.
I was blessed because they lived the history. And so when I went to school, I was already prepared for the education system because I got that education at home. And so when I got to school, I was able to not only teach my fellow classmates, but I was also able to teach and enlighten some of the teachers and even some of the administrators, so that they can change some of the curriculum and implement some of the things that have not been implemented in our education system. And so I'm just totally grateful.
Some of what you mentioned, the idea of us teaching each other, is critical. And I think we ought to make known to the younger generations, they need to know who Derek Hamilton, Ron Daniels, Lori Favors. They need to know who Jennifer Jones Austin, Linda Brown Robinson. Who are these people in our community and why are they valuable to us? As opposed to them prattling off the names of some hip hop person or something that's been sold to them. There are heroes and heroines in our community who are doing things that deserve our attention. Certainly, if we want to talk about Leonard and Rosalind Jeffries, right there you have a couple who have spent decades studying and teaching, but I would dare suggest that most New Yorkers of color don't know who Leonard and Rosalind Jeffries are. And that is to our detriment. We are charged with publicizing their work. We are charged with bringing more students to them. We are charged to making sure that it's not just what's in the newspaper our children learn, but they need to learn what's in valuable books by some of these people that I've mentioned.
Well, Rosalind and Leonard Jeffries often come to the Gilchrist Experience. That's where you can see them.
Master scholars.
Especially Leonard Jeffries.
Yes.
He's got at least 50 to 75 shows on the Gilchrist Experience.
A professor par excellence. I mean, master teacher, studied, learned, and then passes the knowledge on to those who dare to listen.
Well, this is a conversation that also needs to be held within the entertainment industry.
Amen. Amen.
Because I was a kid who grew up in the 80s, and I've got a lot of my teaching not just from at home, but from watching PBS. And I was a Sesame Street kid. I was a Reading Rainbow kid. I was a Romper Room kid. And all of those programs had an impact on me today. It was some of the things that I've learned as a toddler, watching Sesame Street, Romper Room, Reading Rainbow.
Our children
shows
need
like
that.
that I use today, more so than some of the algebra that they teach, that they taught me in elementary school.
Most of the textbooks
Where
are.
can you find that now?
Well, you can go to YouTube, and you know, but
Parents have the obligation. This is what our children, if they go online, this is what they should be reading.
Absolutely, but not only should they be reading this, educators and producers and film writers and directors
And talk show hosts.
Need to take this up, take the mantle, and produce quality programming so that the next generation will have that education. Because most education is gotten from the television now, or from YouTube, or from the computer, or from the iPhones.
So you can find us on YouTube anytime you decide to be educated about your history. And I'm going to run item 3, and then we'll come back to Graham. Are you still here?
Yes, I am.
All right, let's watch this one. And it's about the history of Africa when we had wealth. We still have wealth today.
I'm glad you added that. That's why the Europeans are going to Africa. We still have wealth. We still have.
One way the white supremacists have been able to dominate and subjugate melanated people around the planet is by controlling the education, by controlling the knowledge, and controlling the knowledge of history. Because if you don't know yourself, you don't know how to empower yourself. If you don't know your history, you won't know your future. And the white supremacists have been very meticulous in erasing the history of African people and inserting themselves into that history.
The Greeks were the last race of people that the Egyptians passed the arcane knowledge on to. That's where it's Greek to me came from. They were the last ones that the Egyptians gave that to. It took 3 generations of Greeks under Egyptian rulership that they could finally find one that they could teach.
Now, the Egyptians call their land Kemet, and they use a piece of charcoal, a burnt piece of wood as charcoal, to symbolize what they mean, the blackest black. And all of their carvings of themselves, they paint their skins dark brown or black. They have white paint, red paint, yellow paint, but they paint themselves blacks. How anyone in the world, with so much information available for the public to see, can even be under any illusions that the Egyptian is even light-skinned.
Just when you look at climate and weather, if you go to Egypt, you will notice that the weather is quite hot. And you will notice that it is almost impossible to be able to be outside dressed the way the carvings on the walls are as it relates to the people. Because you would get melanoma before we even knew melanoma existed. So they could not have been depigmented or less pigmented. They have to have been heavily pigmented.
So what we have then is various eyewitness descriptions where people visited Egypt and they left an account of the Egyptians in their texts. So what you have is people like Herodotus, who describes them as black-skinned and woolly-haired. Galen, who describes them as having short, black, dry, and brittle hair.
Not to mention, as Dr. Clark has taught us, where in the world did they do what they did in Africa? He used to say, are you telling me that Eurasians came out of Europe and built Africa up, but never went back to Europe to develop their civilizations the way they did in Africa? Or does it make sense that it was built up in Africa and it was sporadically brought across the globe to China and to Iraq and to Iran and into Europe, where you have the Stonehenge? Would that make better sense? So the answer is, there is no question at this point.
Many of the artifacts that are on display in many of the Egyptian collections around the world are fakes.
The Nefertiti statue is of doubtful authenticity. That's a posh way of saying it's almost certainly a fake. A number of scholars have come out quite recently. Henri Sterling in Switzerland, he's come out and said, listen, this is a 100-year forgery.
If there is hundreds of paintings of Nefertiti and all of them are black, all of the statues in the Cairo Museum of Nefertiti is black, only this one little white statue in Germany is white. Something's wrong with that picture.
Marx was instructed to use the face of Ludwig's wife, Emily Brochard. So the face that supposedly was the most beautiful face of ancient history is actually the features of Ludwig Brochard's wife, Emily Brochard. So now, that's not even the half of it. Beautiful statue, came out of the ground. No, it didn't come out of the ground. What happened was, Brochard, was forced to bring it forward after 11 years. So what did he do? He took the head that Marx made, went back to the Tel Al-Amar site, covered it up with dirt, and came out and had a photo op as if that's how he found it.
One common lie and misconception that many white supremacists like to promote is that the African people didn't invent the wheel. That African people were just primitive, living in West Africa, waiting on the white supremacists to come save them. But in Africa, especially in the area that we now know as southern Libya, right in the Saharan desert, there were rock paintings of black Africans on chariots, and you can see the wheel, and these paintings go back 7,000 years.
In
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? 7,000 years. So we're talking about, I'm always saying we're the original people. The ancient Egyptians were black. Jesus was black. The people in the Bible were black. And here we're brainwashed to think that the white man is superior to us. We've been bamboozled. I mean, we should come out of the dark and understand who we are. But that's what I'm trying to do here. I try to do it every week. But let's say, Graham, you can preach on that one.
Well, he who controls the language controls the conversation.
Okay.
So, the notion that white people are so knowledgeable, the concept of race did not come about until 1500s.
Right.
People lived in clans, tribes, and nations. They didn't consider themselves white, black, or anything. The Roman Empire had many black governors throughout the empire. The first popes, early popes of the Catholic Church were also black. So if you don't record your history, it will not exist. White people good at erasing everything that doesn't glorify them. And no matter where they go, they erase. They erase the indigenous people who own this continent. They use germ warfare to kill them all. Smallpox. The ultimate terrorists come from this continent, from this country. So when you have people who are led to believe, matter of fact, Owen mentioned rap music. If you go back in the early days of the West Coast rap, you will find that all those albums were produced by white people.
Gangster rap.
Going back and look at those albums, white people produced them. They used ignorant black people to put out trash, to corrupt the minds of young people. which they themselves would not have allowed for their children. The notion of East Coast, West Coast, that rivalry goes back to what? Willie Lynch.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Willie Lynch said that if you get this right, it'll work for 300 or 400 years.
And it
And
has.
it still work.
And it has.
Still work.
And it continues to work.
Because we don't know any better.
Well, I can't say that we don't know any better. It's just that too many of us that know better just are not involved in doing better. We know what's going on. It's just that people are fearful, whether it's they're afraid of losing their jobs, they're afraid of losing their fan base, they're afraid of, money's not coming into the household, whatever the case may be. But if we all stand, look at Colin Kaepernick. Just look at the
You
whole
stand on
situation.
principle and they cut you where it hurts.
He was
So
half
it's not,
black
it's,
and half
it's
white.
not too many of us who are willing to step up, and I don't want to say sacrifice ourselves, but stand
That's
up
what it is.
and take the beating.
Sometimes that sacrifice is necessary. And we have to ask ourselves, with the number of black billionaires that now exist, we have to say, are they passing on information to their children, our children, about how we can conquer this capitalist system, or are they merely accumulating wealth for themselves? And that's a question even in our own families we have to ask. Did you want that gold and that bling, or did you want the college scholarship? This is part of the conversation, or should be part of the conversation at the dinner table with our teenagers. You can make lots of money out there, dribbling a basketball or doing something in show business, or you can make information available to the next generation by educating yourself. Some of our children don't even understand that contrast, and that's not a question they would be able to deal with. We as adults have to make it clear to them. This is a choice that they will have. Are you going for the gold, or are you going for the greater glory and enrichment of our people?
Right, and if I could just interject, I feel that all across the globe, we live in a capitalist society. We live in an industrial society all across the world.
It's a painful truth.
And it's all about making money because we all need money to survive. Granted that. But it's just unfortunate that, and I don't want to just say the white race, because you have people of color who are also guilty of the same, of
Yes.
exploiting
We've literally bought
their
into
tribes,
that.
their people, their citizens to acquire wealth. And so we've got to change our minds and change the way we think as far as it comes to acquiring wealth. I call it red money and I call it green money. Okay, red money is exploiting people, breaking up families,
Right.
busting up societies and making communities unsafe and unfit.
Gangster rap. Drug dealers. Pimps.
Glorifying
These are the
things.
heroes.
But this is what's presented to say, don't be a doctor, don't be a lawyer, don't be an
Writer, an
engineer, don't be a
artist.
rocket scientist, don't try to be an astronaut. Just be an entertainer, entertain us,
Yeah.
and exploit your community and degrade your community, and you can make a few dollars. There is green ways of making money, whether it comes to solar energy, and I'm just using that as an example, that there are other ways to acquire wealth. And if we change our minds and our ways of doing things, we can do many things. We can save the world, we can save the earth, and we can all thrive as a human race.
I go back to Martin and say, you judge a person by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin.
That's what I
And
live
I
my
think
life
black people have to apply that to themselves most of all.
Absolutely.
Because look at the problem that we're having today with a white supremacist, no doubt about it, Donald Trump. It shouldn't be any doubt in your mind who this man is.
Right.
Yet we have the balance of power being 3-4 points away.
And a lot of our younger people don't understand why he means peril to them.
Why is he even running? Why is he
even
it all
allowed
looks
to
like
run?
a setup.
I mean,
And people give up, and there's a fear. There's a Willie Lynch syndrome working his show.
We have to work in our community to uplift our people so that all our children can know some sense of justice and that all of our community can know some sense of peace, as opposed to working in the community just to accumulate bling.
Mm-hmm.
Because television tells you get that bling. Some books and magazines tell you get that bling. And we have to be careful because that message is in our children's ear all the time.
But you need the bling in order to survive.
No, do we? We need the knowledge. We need the food. Do we need the bling to survive?
You do need money to survive.
You do need some, yes.
You can't get by without money.
We do need some things, material things in order to survive, yes.
But how you get it?
Yeah,
you know,
that's critical.
That's the difference.
Right.
Greed and selfishness has to go by the wayside. You have to build up your character as a human being.
Absolutely.
Not the color of your skin, as a human being.
Right.
So it's God in your heart, and I'm always leading to that love energy, and there's one race, the human race, and we got to live with that. If you survive any of this onslaught of being black or colored or whatever, you have to learn to maintain that stability of sanity.
Not easy to do. Not easy to do, especially when people are making assaults upon your sanity and making assaults upon your morality every day, and TV, radio, the stages, they're making attacks upon our sanity. And we have to strengthen our children, because without us, there is no future. Without us, they would be going down the wrong
But look
path.
at the nut running for president.
Right.
The man is crazy.
I'd rather look at the educated woman who's running against him.
Okay. So why would it be in any doubt in any black mind or a conscious mind? Now, I'm dying to see how many people are going to vote for him. And we will know the status of America. What did you say, Graham? People.
Well, one thing I'm thinking about is the number of people that will not be voting in Florida.
Yeah. That's
The
going
storm is going to affect infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's wiping homes off the map.
Right.
It is sending people to other regions. And for some of them, there will be nothing to come back to.
Right.
So the state of Florida may be in a state of flux.
Yeah, the votes of our southern neighbors being squashed and being drowned. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. The Latino community, they need some guidance. There is programming now geared to influencing their minds. The notion that they think they're white, and they can't even connect with the suffering of their own people coming across the border.
Yeah.
The Cubans, there's something about them. Well, they were played by the Americans during the days of Batista before Fidel Castro came in. And people don't know that the U.S. picked Fidel to be their Uncle Tom.
43.
He flipped the script on them. They don't know that Che Guevara was a medical doctor before he was a revolutionary.
Right.
And he cared about his people.
Yeah.
People will not study. Bible says, study to show yourself approved to God, a workman that needeth not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. And that's not just for the gospel, that's for everything going on around you. So people walking around in darkness. There was a guy, we had a lawsuit years ago on the job. It was the Latinos, or the Hispanic Society it was then, enjoined a lawsuit. We told them, so listen, you can't play both sides of the fence. You need to figure out who you are. If you want to be white, be white. But black people have been fighting for people's rights, and everybody comes here to get on the civil rights bandwagon, thinking there's somebody they're not, and then think they can leave black people in the back of the bus.
That's right.
But there was a sergeant who was in the lawsuit. His first name was Umberto, but he called himself Bert. And he and I had some interactions, and I had to give him a straight up man-to-man warning. But when this lawsuit was settled, he was called into the chief's office, and he said, Bert, I see you're in the lawsuit. He says, yeah. He says, well, why are you in the lawsuit? He said, oh, I'm Hispanic. He said, oh, his last name was Hispanic. He said, well, I want you to explain this to me. Here's your paperwork from when you came on the job. And he slid it across the desk. He said, you listed your race as white. You will not get a penny of the lawsuit from Hispanic and black litigation.
Well, choose ye this
Now go
day.
back to work, go back to your assignment. So they want to play this game. They want to play like they're better than somebody else.
To get ahead.
And they want to, they were led to believe in Cuba. You go down to Florida and those Cubans think they're white. They think they're something they're not. But there's one thing I respect the Attorney General, when they had the Elian Gonzalez case, she told them if they didn't stop acting stupid, they were going to send them back where they came from. So they shut their mouths real quick. You're not white, and this is not your country.
All right.
Quickly change their tune.
I have one more.
So people really need to find out who they are. Whether you're Taino, Arab, Arawak, you're not white. And there are really no white people. I gotta go to get to this class.
All right.
So I'll see you next week.
All right, Grant.
Thank you.
Run item 4 for me, and we'll be right back at you. Yeah, this one I want you to watch.
Traditional African religions, particularly the one from ancient Egypt and Sudan, venerated this idea called Ma'at. And Ma'at, roughly speaking, you could translate it as truth, as justice, as righteousness, as reciprocity. The problem is when you're being attacked by people who don't believe any of that, and you are trying to do the Ma'atic thing, they will beat you, unfortunately. And this is one of those harsh lessons that the black community is still to learn.
The assumption that another group's view of humanity is the same as ours. The assumption that another group's understanding of divinity is the same as ours. The African moved from the premise that everybody was a brother, and thus should be treated and accorded that kind of brothership and brotherhood. The European moved from a position that what is mine, and what is yours is mine if I can take it. You had a war culture coming in contact with an agrarian culture. The war culture is always going to win, because the war culture doesn't put any value on human life. And that means it has no barometer to how much death and destruction it will carry out.
People talk about the greatness of Africa, and we see some of the great empires that we had over in Africa. And naturally, a lot of people will say, okay, if we had all these great empires, where did Africa go wrong? There's several situations that happened. One thing that happened with Africa, you had Mansa Musa. Now, Mansa Musa, according to most historians, a West African black man who was a king in the area that we know as Mali and Timbuktu, the wealthiest man to ever live. And Mansa Musa's situation was a gift and a curse, because Mansa Musa, he went around the world basically just giving out gold. This man had so much money, he could give money away. And he gave so much money out, it decimated certain economies in other nations. So it showed the humanity of the African people and the generosity of the African people, but you showed people that you had all of this wealth, so now people are plotting on you. So when people saw Mansa Musa giving out all that money, he became lunch to everybody else. So Africa started to get raided and flooded with all types of people trying to take advantage of the wealth and the resources that were in Africa.
The tide rises and falls. I mean, what are we talking about? We're not supposed to be a victim of time. When you're going into Africa when it was falling, when it was old and worn out, trying to nurture and educate the East Indians, the Chinese, and the Europeans. We were trying to help all of these people to raise them up to a higher level, and they wore us out. Even today, you'll get worn out if you talk to a certified Negro under warranty. They will wear you out.
We didn't take military matters seriously. We didn't take warfare seriously. And I'm aware that the propaganda where the West presents, such as the Zulus, as a highly militaristic nation. Unfortunately, we needed a lot more Zulus and a lot more people on that militaristic thing, because historically that's where we were weak.
I don't know why Nubia fell, besides all nations fall. Rome fell, Greece fell, the current empires you're in are gonna fall and new superpowers are gonna come. So yeah, we failed. Kings died. Other people mishandled money. The same thing that happened with your grandmama inheritance after she died. The same thing. Some of your cousins went and wilded out with it. The other of your cousins took it and created their own little things. Same thing happened, but the question is, how do we create in Israel? How do we create in India? How do we create a Germany? How do we create something for us? Because we need something, you know? Dr. John Henry Clark was like, we're yelling that we want a nation, and it's nation time, and we don't even know how to build a train. The Japanese bought one train, reverse engineered that train, now they're selling trains. Any nation fails is you don't want it to fall again. So ultimately, if I wanted to find out why any black nation failed, I would go to the most recent one, because the most recent one works by our recent standards of governing and governance, and that would be Haiti. Why did Haiti fail? Haiti was sabotaged by France. Haiti was looted, and she was sanctioned globally.
Haiti offered any blacks anywhere in the hemisphere, from the Dominican Republic, the United States, if you can escape from slavery and get here, you're a free man and we protect the integrity of your freedoms. That is what the anger against Haiti was about. Haiti was the first free republic that offered freedom to any enslaved people, black or white, from anywhere. If you make it to these lands, our army will protect your integrity.
Hope you really got something out of that one. See, because I see this nation today with Kamala Harris running for president, a black woman of a variety of colors. She's an American, the true meaning of you know,
the
living by
pot.
the content of your character, not by the color of your skin. She's married to a Jewish man, a Jamaican father, an Indian mother, and she's a sister that went to Howard, and she's a sister all the way. She walks and talks like a black woman. That's her upbringing, her dedication to being fair. Now, why is there any question of the two characters that are running for president? Why are we having an argument about this? I can't understand it, really.
We're not having the argument. There's some idiots out there who are having trouble understanding or believing that that kind of wisdom and experience can come to them looking the way Kamala Harris does. But we are not having a problem. And the people who are having a problem, we have to deal with them appropriately, you know, politically, otherwise.
Well, the number of them and the number of us is a vast difference because of our exposure, especially being at NAN. I mean, we're about justice. We might mention that we're all NAN people. We've got Reverend Sharpton that's my pastor. I come to church every Saturday. I mean, everybody knows that. And that's my sanity. I come to National Action Network to keep my sanity. Because I know God's in charge. There's no way in the world that God would let this happen. Donald Trump becoming president again. I mean, why isn't it more obvious to everybody? I don't understand it. It's beyond me. If you have any doubts about Kamala, dismiss them. That's a blessing from God. What else could it be?
Right.
What else could it be? Who else going to save us?
Right.
But ourselves. Right. Now, we pray hard enough. We've done the right thing. We're a kind-hearted people, dominated by the cave people. Now, we just saw it in this piece. Where does our hearts come from? God.
That's right.
And that God is love. Now, we were always generous. You know, we'd tap dance and sing at slave. You know, we got through it all.
Right.
Look what we got through. 400 years of genocide, the Gazans and 50,000 people killed in a year. And they're arguing about whether there should be a ceasefire. Why is that there? Why is that? You know, where's God? I always ask that question. Where's God in this? God's got to come down and save us because we're the righteous people of the planet.
But the Bible also talks about faith without works is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And see, God gave us all free will.
Right.
He gave us 2 ears to listen, 1 mouth to speak, and a brain to think. And if we don't use what God gave us as our gifts, we'll continue to default.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to use what God has given us so that we can progress into the future, into this new millennium.
You got 3 minutes?
Because people forget, we're in a new millennium.
Mhm.
2.
We're in the 21st century now. We're no longer in the 20th century, and so therefore our thinking is still antiquated.
Mm-hmm.
Some
Until
people.
we change
Yes.
our thought patterns
Mm-hmm.
and our policies, we are going to continue to repeat the cycle. And again, we are living in pivotal times. This is the first time in American history that we've got as many people we do of color in all positions of government, from the local level
Yeah.
all the way up to the executive branch.
Yeah.
And so if we as a people of color, because everybody doesn't identify as African American,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
okay? Some people identify as Caribbean American,
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic American.
Divide and conquer.
You understand where I'm coming
Yeah.
from? And so, but it's okay to be identified with where you initially come from, because, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the African American was cultivated. It's not an original race, because when you go to China, you meet Chinese people.
Mm-hmm.
You go to Dominican Republic, you meet Dominican people.
Well,
You go to Cuba, you meet Cuban people. So what I'm saying is, you go to
I've
Israel, you
abided
meet
by
Jewish
all the
people.
rules, and we only have a minute left. I've abided by all rules, and I've had my ups and downs, and Kamala for president.
Absolutely.
And then you watch this world change. That's all I got to say. God in me loves the God in you, and stay tuned for more information. That's what you get here. And a history lesson.
Right.
We've got to teach humans how to be human. And that includes white people, because they're human, the ones that act human. But Donald Trump is not human. And you have to understand that and vote accordingly. Who's going to help you be human? It's not Donald Trump.
Well, we
Amen
have
to that.
3 weeks to get our act together.
Power to the people.
Power to the people.
Power to the
Power
people.
to the people.
God bless. That was fun.
It was.
Except for the